It's one of my strengths and one of my weaknesses, but I hate to lose.
The voice you just heard is Aaron Falk. Aaron Falk has served as president and CEO of Kern Community Foundation since 2021. He grew up in Bakersfield, graduated from Stockdale High. He has a degree in political science from the University of California at Santa Barbara. We talk about that on the podcast. He's currently in the MBA program over at Cal State University, Bakersfield. He has had a lot of interesting jobs. He worked in Washington, D.C. for a little while. I'll save that for you to listen to in the interview. We go off on a couple tangents and hear about some of his experience working in Congress as a staffer there and some pretty interesting stuff. These days, he's back in Bakersfield with his family, his wife and daughter, and he works at Kern Community Foundation. Kern Community Foundation is a local charitable foundation. They're kind of an interesting organization in that they do not actually provide services in the community. However, they are the fundraising arm and the fund management arm for a lot of organizations. And they have a very important role and a pretty wide-ranging role. We get into it on the podcast. So without further ado, stay tuned for a great conversation with Aaron Falk.
Welcome back to the Our 2 Cents podcast, the show where your local professionals sit down with an array of guests to hear their story and impart some wisdom for both business and life-improving skills. This is your place to hear business and community leaders discuss relevant topics that matter to you.
And welcome to the Our 2 Cents podcast. My name is Scott Hansen. I'm your host today. Today I'm joined by Aaron Falk. Before we get started with the interview, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on whatever podcast player that you're playing us on. We really appreciate that. And be sure to check us out on Instagram. Aaron, thanks a lot for being here today with us.
Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah, I think it's pretty timely because I know you guys have some stuff coming up at Kern Community Foundation. I know we'll get into that. Maybe we can start and kind of rewind a little bit, though, and start with what brought you into Kern Community Foundation, because you haven't been there very long, but I know you have a long history of both education, working in D.C., and all these other really interesting things that probably brought you to this position.
It's been a long journey. It'll be a year for me right around Christmas 2022.
Okay.
And to be honest, this wasn't on my radar a year and a half ago, but once I learned a little bit more about what a community foundation does and its role here in Kern County, it sounded like it was tailor-made for me.
And so you did some work in D.C., right? And was that as internship, kind of college years, or were you employed there?
Sure. So I graduated from UC Santa Barbara in 2010, which was probably the worst year to graduate from a college in California.
No kidding.
And moved back to Bakersfield, and there was nothing.
Right at the trough of the recession after the boom and bust in the real estate world and everything, yeah.
Yeah, and I was a little bit older when I graduated. I was 28 or 29.
Okay.
I was a freshman in 2000 and then had to leave when my parents split and their business went under, and, it happens. Worked a series of sales jobs, things I could do without any real skills. Doing door-to-door newspaper sales. Yeah. I worked up into Yellow Pages back when that was a thing.
Oh, yeah.
Industrial real estate down in Los Angeles for a minute. I was even a licensed commodities broker. Making 700 phone calls a day, which inspired me to go back to school.
Sure.
And even did a year as a golf pro here in town.
Oh, good.
Playing some tournaments and stuff. I'm not Tiger Woods or anything, but it allowed me to get on the right side of the financial aid math. And so I was able to go back to school. And so I was really motivated because I got this second chance where I didn't know if I necessarily deserved it, but I got it. And it was thanks to, the government being open to allowing me to do that. And it really framed my mindset the second time through college. And so I went from being an econ major to a poli-sci major because the way the policies were written was actually having an impact on my life. And it's like, okay, well, I guess I better learn about these. So I finished in 2010 with my poli-sci degree, which is, of course, of no use in Bakersfield, especially in 2010.
Right.
I had family in Northern Virginia, about an hour and change outside of DC. And I'm talking to them and, going on about my challenges finding work in Bakersfield. And they said, well, there's no recession in Washington. You're welcome to crash on our couch and see what you can find out here. So I printed out a stack of resumes, and I had 2 cheap suits that didn't fit very well. But I loaded them in the back of my Camry and drove to Washington, D.C.
No kidding.
And so I'm sleeping on their couch, and I'm getting up every morning, driving the hour and a half into D.C., knocking on every door in Congress, looking for anything at all. And I backed my way into an unpaid internship with the House Democratic Caucus. So there I am, taking notes, answering phones, and I get to go staff the caucus meetings, which are members only. So there's all of the Democratic members of Congress, and then 2 or 3 of us staff taking notes and again, coffee and snacks and all of that. But it was a great front row seat to watching how all of that worked.
Just to be in that room, right? In those kind of high level discussions about probably everything, I imagine.
It would be nice if they were all high level discussions, but a lot of the nuances of what goes on in Congress are not always high level.
That's one of the good, important takeaways from being in those meetings, maybe, is that they're not all high level as we might think.
But it was a master class in watching the process. And I'm sure we'll talk a little more about politics, but Nancy Pelosi runs the show in there.
Yeah.
And she's no joke. She knows how to run that.
Yeah.
And to keep both sides, you're hurting cats, right? And
sure.
She kept them in line. And it was really interesting to see that up close and personal.
So you really had to hustle to even get that position. And I imagine that the door-to-door phone book sales and commodity broker sales calls and everything must have paid off at that time. Did you already have that sort of drive to be able to handle 750 calls a day, or was that a learned thing when you were just trying to figure out how to make it?
No, I had that drive.
You did, yeah.
Yeah. And it's one of my strengths and one of my weaknesses, but I hate to lose.
Yeah.
Like I hate losing. I'm so competitive. And it's something that has served me very well, but at the same time, it can make me kind of an ass. But I'm always trying to find that sweet spot between doing as much as I can to make sure that everything works out properly and like not going overboard and just being a psychopath.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, so did it ever become a paid internship or?
No.
Okay.
Paid internships don't really exist in Congress.
Okay.
But I did that for about 5 or 6 weeks, and it allowed me to do some strategic networking in Congress. And I weaseled my way into an entry-level job at the House Armed Services Committee. And so that's a committee on the House side of Congress that does the defense bill every year, which is a Herculean effort. It's a 1,200-page bill.
And every year it's re-voted in.
Right. It's the only bill where this happens every year successfully. Okay. I think they're at 60 straight years. That's a DiMaggio-like streak. Mm-hmm. That's unheard of. I think the next longest bill is 3 years.
So not only does it have the streak, but it also is probably one of the biggest line items on the budget that's passed each year, right?
For the authorizations, yeah. I mean, $800 billion plus your OCO, your overseas contingency operations was another $150 to $250 billion. Because this was while the wars were going on. Sure. So it was contentious too. Meanwhile, we would pass the defense bill out of committee almost unanimously, if not unanimously every year, and then it would get overwhelming support on the floor. It was one of the very few bills where that happened. And so as a committee staffer, you got to see how the sausage was made. You were making the sausage, right? So it was taking 64 different members and their priorities and putting all of that together into a bill that everybody could vote for.
So how does a 1,000-page bill, who reads the 1,000-page bill? I mean, you got the voting member of Congress, right? The House member or the Senate member. Who is actually reading that? Is it staffers who are then summarizing large segments of it and then briefing the voting member on the information? Or are some of these actual Congress members reading 1,000-page bills?
To my knowledge, very few of the members read all 1,000 pages.
Yeah.
The chairman did, the ranking member did. The subcommittee chairs certainly had their subcommittees, on lock. I mean, that's why you have the staff, right?
Yeah.
So as a staffer, not only would I read every page of it, we would get different drafts, right? First you get the chairman's mark, and then you get the version that passes the committee. Then you get the version that passes the House. Then you get the version that passes the Senate committee. Then you get the version that passes the Senate. And then you have to reconcile them at the end of the year. And so you have to know every change that happens in each version of this bill and any of those funding or program items that might affect things that are important to your district or state.
Wow. Yeah, I always hear about these large bills passing, and with everything else they're doing, either they're working on their next campaign to get reelected, or they're working on some other media thing that's taking their focus or that they have to speak on. And I'm always sort of at a loss as to, like, when do they actually have the physical time to be able to read these things? And then you hear about them voting on things without reading them or without really knowing what was in them. Famously, I think there was one, 10 years ago or something where, like,
I think there was a healthcare bill.
Somebody, just that little thing called a healthcare bill. But what wasn't, there were some quotes out of many Congress people's own mouths saying, yeah, we haven't read this thing, but we're going to vote on it, or we don't want to vote on it because we haven't read it. Just found that crazy.
Yeah, it's best not to think about it too much. But I mean, there's so much on any given day. You could be voting on 500 or thousands of pages worth of bill language.
Yeah, it's wild.
You don't have the capacity to read it all.
It just isn't humanly possible to be
right.
able to read.
Fortunately, I mean, I wouldn't encourage anybody to go read all of the bill language, but if you have a bill where it's doing one small thing, it could be 8 pages of bill language because this one small thing makes edits to 4 different previous laws.
Yeah.
And so each of those is a page of like where you find the law, what the edit is, what the previous version is, what the new version is. So it sounds like it's 1,200 pages of new laws, but really a lot of that is just the legal gobbledygook that describes what's going on.
Sure, and then those little nuanced changes, I've seen that before in real estate law where just a little clause or a line or maybe how a verb is tensed or something like that might change, but it actually can have pretty big impacts on all of the professionals that are trying to carry out that line of work, right? And so we've seen that a lot in the real estate business anyway.
Sometimes, I mean, you'll argue over should this say shall or should this say may?
Right.
And what are the cost implications of that?
Yes, that one word can have some major ripples all throughout. So at some point your time in D.C. ended and you decided to come back home. How'd that go?
Yeah, so I did almost 4 years at the committee, and then when Martha McSally won her first House race out of Arizona, she hired me to do all of her military, veterans, and space and foreign affairs policy.
Okay.
Which was great, and I got a few laws passed, super duper proud of that.
Oh, nice.
But then I kind of met my wife, and who's not from here. She's from Baltimore.
Okay.
Hi, Lauren, if you downloaded this. And, we wanted to buy a house and start a family, but neither of us were smart enough to be born into a wealthy family. So in D.C., that was kind of off of our radar. And so we drew a line in the sand that said at the end of 2017, we're out and we're moving to Bakersfield.
Where you're from originally, right?
Her idea.
And so when you landed back in Bakersfield, it was Kern Community Foundation your first stop off, or have you been doing other things in Bakersfield since?
Yeah, I didn't know what a community foundation was in 2017.
You know what? I bet a lot of our listeners don't exactly know. I think that you get the idea from the name that it's a charitable organization and that somehow there's donations going on in Kern community. It must benefit the community, but maybe you can kind of give us the rundown as what it is. What is this foundation? And then how does it differ from other nonprofits that we commonly hear about in the community?
Sure. So there are about 800 community foundations in the United States. It's not a franchise, but we have a board of national standards that we have to meet to make sure that we're all roughly doing the same thing. But because we each have our own defined geography, we can have wildly different sets of needs and different actors and stakeholders and all of that. So for Kern County, it's inward facing, and we work with our fund holders. I've got between 250 and 300 fund holders who want to do local good works, whether that is scholarships for students or granting to our local nonprofits or supporting other field of interest activities, maybe keeping a river clean or research into new types of energy use. And so they are able to use us as their personal foundation. People might be familiar with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, right? So that's a private foundation where they've got their own team of lawyers and accountants who handle all of their charitable giving to make sure that they are on the right side of the IRS, especially when they're granting money out. Not everybody has those resources. Yeah. And so that's where you would use a community foundation. So you can open up a fund with us. It can be endowed, non-endowed, all sorts of options. And whenever it makes sense for somebody to donate, you can put that into your fund and then you can turn around and grant that out down the road. So it's not like, let's say you have $1,000 and you want to give it to the Boys and Girls Club, right? Great organization. We work with them all the time. You'll give them the $1,000 and they will go do good things with it here in town. But let's say that you have $1,000 and you want it to go to helping somebody who is recovering from a wildfire, but there's not a wildfire going on. So you could put that in your fund right now and it'll sit there and we'll invest it and it'll grow a little interest. And then when there is a wildfire, you've already got your charitable money in this account and you can grant it out as needed.
Okay, and you have a lot of these funds already set up, like maybe a wildfire fund, for an example, but also I think you will take suggestions or recommendations as money is coming in as well, where people can sort of customize something with you or collaborate with you about what a new fund would look like for a particular cause?
Sure. These are designated as donor-advised funds.
Okay.
Meaning the donor advises what happens with the fund.
Do you have sort of an annual budget, or is it always in flux with the amount of donations coming in, or are you constantly raising funds that get put away and you're not spending principal, you're only spending the revenue or the interest off of that, or the investment returns off of those principal dollars?
In a good year, you will be spending the interest.
Okay.
We have a 4% spend policy annually. Most years, the gains are so much past that 4% that you don't touch the principal. Some years, like don't look at your year to date this year, but
right, yeah, it's a little rough.
Yeah, and so we'll ebb and flow with that, but in general, we've got a very supportive community here. We're in pretty good shape.
Okay, and you have something called the Give Big Kern. That is a sub-fund within your group of funds, if I have that correct, right? It's a particular fund that people can give to, but you guys raised a ton of money in that. Maybe just tell us a little bit about your progress this year in that.
Sure. So we do Give Big Kern the first Tuesday of May.
Okay.
And this is similar to what we just had of Giving Tuesday, right? On, you had Black Friday and Cyber Monday and Giving Tuesday.
Yep.
But we do another day of giving in May. What we do there is we host the platform for our Kern County-based nonprofits to have a big day of giving. And then we do all of the legwork to drum up attention and to have the platform that exists for people to donate.
I see.
And then on that big day in 24 hours, we just go all out. And, we're at the Liberty Bell at 5 a.m. with the mayor.
Okay.
We're on media all day, and we're working with other local businesses who want to match to support nonprofits. And we've raised, we started this in 2015. I think we cleared $4 million in total cumulative this year.
Wow.
Wow. Including $870,000 or so on the actual day of giving. Now, we don't take anything out of this.
Yeah.
What we are doing is fundraising directly for our local nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
And so we partner with them and they do a lot of the work to get their normal donators excited about it. But then because of the gravity of the day and all the media, new people come in and we'll get donations from John on the street may see that the cat people have a fund and he's never heard of them, but he likes cats.
Yeah.
And so he donates $100 to the cat people.
So it's just that effort of making awareness on this big push, on this big day to be able to raise these funds. So if you're a local nonprofit and you want access to these funds or you want to participate in this, is it like they're writing a grant to you, or are they collaborating with you in advance of this money raising event?
Right, in advance. And all you have to do is be a registered nonprofit. You have to be at the silver level or higher on GuideStar. And that's an independent organization that monitors nonprofits for transparency and their spending rates and things like that. Mm-hmm. Silver is not a super high bar. And if you're having issues with it, we're happy to help you get from where you are to where you need to be.
I'm unfamiliar with GuideStar. Is it pretty common for nonprofits to subscribe to that and be a part of that organization?
Yes, that's the gold standard.
Is it? Yeah, okay. So locally we have a lot of at least, say, silver level or above GuideStar.
Yeah, so for Give Big Kern in 2022, we had 130 or 131 participating nonprofits.
Okay, well, that's great. How about some of your youth programs? So I know you have Bakersfield Youth Program, but you have a couple things going on. You have this program to be able to help employ high school age students, right? And really, I think your youth program even kind of goes on all the way up to 30 years old.
Yeah, correct.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So this is exciting. This is a project we're working with the city of Bakersfield. And it started with federal ARPA funding that went to the states. And the big city mayors, and I'll give our mayor, Karen Go, a lot of credit here, had been pushing Governor Newsom very hard for a fund for local workforce development, especially at the city level, where they have problems convincing people to go work for cities across the state. In order to help develop their workforce, they said, okay, well, we're going to grant this money to the city. In our case, they wanted to partner with us to administer the program because they don't have the in-house resources to do it, right? Because you need workforce development, so you probably don't have the workforce.
Sure. And so like a question right there is, when that state money comes in, does it go find its way to Kern Community Foundation more easily because the foundation is already set up and that structure is in place? Or do those dollars stay with the city program, for an example, and you guys just help administer that?
Yeah, so the money goes to the city and then the city council grants it out in chunks to the foundation.
Okay, I see. To turn around and support the program that the city is involved with.
And so then we collaborate on the programmatic elements of it, the reporting of it, the budgeting and the tracking of all of that.
And so who is that targeted towards? What age groups and what is the mission there?
It's ages 16 to 30, and it's a $5.4 million grant over 4.5 years, and we're going to create about 450 paid internships and fellowships. And there's about 4 or 5 different buckets of what these internships and fellowships could be. Started this summer with our high school internship at City Hall, where we opened the program up, and in 2 weeks of advertising it and some local media, we had about 200 applicants. And if you talk to people looking for staff, to get 200 applicants in 2 weeks, and we weren't on a single job board. We're just working our network and on LinkedIn, but not on Indeed or any of those. So about 100 of those were pretty good. Narrowed it down to 30, interviewed, and we found 15 just phenomenal kids. And what's great about these kids that did this program is they were certainly all talented, hardworking kids, but we're not looking for the 4.4 GPA in 7 clubs and is applying to Harvard.
Sure.
These are good kids who were smart and talented and just needed an opportunity to shine. Maybe they hadn't had the opportunity to, some of them were caring for sick family or other things where you just don't have the resources to do the extracurricular activities you need to stand out in an academic setting.
Were they go-getters? Were they showing up? After they got hired?
Yeah, I encourage everybody, go to our website, go to www.kernfoundation.org and find our National Intern Day videos and see what these kids were up to. Holy cow.
Really?
I wish this had existed when I was in high school.
Sounds fantastic. Wow. So how long does that internship last? Is it a matter of months?
It was it's summer and for high schoolers. So
okay, and then you guys just opened something up, right?
Right.
Is that related, or is that...
It's a different phase of it. So this one was for working at City Hall.
Okay.
And on Friday, December 2nd, we launched our nonprofit cohort.
Okay.
And this was an important one, working with our city manager, Christian Clegg, on a program to help at-risk and vulnerable youth potentially get on the right path, and at the same time help our local nonprofits who are also having workforce issues.
Okay.
And so we are using Bakersfield Youth Jobs Program to pay for the interns. And so the interns are Kern Community Foundation employees. They're on my payroll, they're on my workers' comp, all of that. And we can place them at nonprofits in town to work and develop skill sets and be useful to the nonprofit. And at the same time, the nonprofits are exposing people to that career path. And we're able to match them by geography, because not all of them have access to a vehicle or anywhere near a bus stop. We can match them on interest, and we can match them to people that they already know.
What a nice combination of services. So not only are you raising dollars or collaborating to raise dollars, and then those dollars go out to these local charities, but you're also now collaborating on actually staffing, right? If only temporarily, or are these permanent positions that could turn into permanent positions for people coming in through this avenue and then ending up at these nonprofits permanently?
Yeah, the idea is that it is to help the nonprofits hire.
Okay.
Many of them have limited budgets, 3 to 6 months of operating expenses at any given time. Yeah. And so it's hard to make a long-term decision like that on hiring somebody if you don't know for sure that it's going to work out. So we'll pay for the first 300 or so hours of employment, 20 hours a week at minimum wage, maybe a little bit more, to give them the opportunity. And then along the way, because now we're specifically looking for at-risk or vulnerable kids. And so that means, you're under-resourced, marginalized. You live below a census tract that's below 80% of the federal poverty line. Maybe you or your family have been justice involved. Maybe you've been part of the foster care system. Maybe you've got mental health problems or a disability. Those are all things that put you in the program. They don't make it harder for you. That's what I'm looking for.
How in the world does a young person with those kind of struggles and difficulties find out about this thing to begin with? Are you working with high school counselors, or
well, hopefully they listen to the 2 Cents podcast.
Hopefully they're downloading the Our 2 Cents podcast. You're absolutely right. And just on the chance that they didn't catch it here, what are some places they can find out more about it?
Go to our website, and we've got a tab for the Youth Jobs Program. But we are doing outreach. We've got relationships with Kern County Superintendent of Schools and the high school district. Pretty much every guidance counselor in the system through our scholarship program.
Good. They know about it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
yes.
Good.
We're reaching out through other service organizations that support foster system or justice-involved youth already. We're working with our, the Boys and Girls Clubs. We've stood up an advisory board to help us make sure that we are getting our outreach into the right parts of town and using the right trusted messengers to make sure that we're getting to everybody. So whether that's Southeast Bakersfield or East Side or Oildale or, some of the areas where there are lacks of opportunity.
Man, that is a great opportunity. Will you guys open back up this coming summer for the summer internship as well? So about when should people be on the lookout for applications for that?
April.
April, okay. So, and there again, check your website for updates on that. Okay, wonderful.
We'll also run a 11-month fellowship at City Hall that's geared more for college level. So they're looking for people who have the beginnings of a hard skill set, whether it's accounting or social media or even to work in the clerk's office. Yeah. But maybe somebody who's already got a little bit of education or work experience. We're also going to have a unit with the mobile parks team to go and make sure that the amenities that are important for Bakersfield's quality of life are in good shape and expose that as a career path too.
It sounds like it worked well enough last year that there's some other programs that wanted to jump on board for this year.
Yeah.
That's a good sign. Do you think you'll hire more than 15 at the end of the day on this next summer program?
Well, I think there's only, there's 12 departments at the city, and they've got to have a manager who can be devoted to making sure this is an enriching experience.
Yeah,
so
good point.
15 seems like a good number. If they can support more, then we'll do more. But 15 seems like the sweet spot.
Yeah, no, that does sound good. Aaron, I really appreciate you coming in today. Before we close, we always like to rapid fire a few questions.
Sure,
sometimes a little bit personal questions, so I hope you don't mind. But maybe you can give us a quote that you live by.
Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good.
I like that one. I've heard that before, and I really like that. Yeah, why do you like that?
Well, that's
my that a little bit.
I mean, my staff director at the Armed Services Committee used to say that, and actually, when I worked for Kevin McCarthy, I would hear that too. That okay, hey, you've got 42 different tasks today. You could spend every possible moment to make sure that they're all nailed 100% locked down, but you're going to go nuts.
I think that's really good advice for somebody who's super competitive. You mentioned that you were. I'm sure you have had to remind yourself of that quote a couple times because I know I can fall into that trap of it having to be perfect or me having to be right, and it's, okay, that's not what's most important here.
I'm not saying it's written on my computer screen, but it's written on my computer screen.
Yeah, I get it. What's a book that you'd recommend or that you've read and commonly recommend out for other people to read?
So, and this is a little specific, but it's called Golf is Not a Game of Perfect by Dr. Bob Rotella. And I believe he's got a spinoff that's more applicable, but Life is Not a Game of Perfect. But it's basically showing how you actually get better performance when you back off a little bit. And it's okay to have a conservative strategy and cocky execution to let you keep your aggressive mindset. But if you try to go all out at everything you do, even if you have the talent and you put in the work, you're not going to end up performing as well as somebody who comes in a little bit looser. Do you recommend that to the golfer specifically, or that's a lesson
for
kind
everybody?
Of a,
yeah. That's a good point. Is that intensity just like mental intensity you need to let off of, or
There's a two or three chapters in there about how to try less hard.
All right.
Which isn't the same as being lazy or not having to be important, but just...
No, you're right. It's different when you are being lazy or when you are intentionally maybe throttling back for the purpose of higher performance. I get that. What is the best advice you've ever received, or the best advice you would give?
Don't make decisions when you're emotional. That's one I got from Kevin McCarthy. I worked for him for a little over 4 years here in town. I've never seen somebody who is so steady at what they're doing and rational in their decision making. And it affects the way that he would treat people, because no matter what was going on, it just didn't get to him, or at least you didn't see it.
What was his method, maybe, for bringing down the emotion? Was it just a waiting period? Was it a time? Was it count to 10 or I'll talk to you tomorrow? Or was it like what was his method for doing that?
If I knew Kevin's secret, I wouldn't be sitting here with you right now.
What's your secret? What do you use? I mean,
after a while, you've been stabbed or shot with arrows so many times that it's just another arrow. And so, I mean, part of working in Congress or even, this started with my door-to-door sales, is like, people are mean.
Yeah.
And after a while, you've heard everything, you've seen everything. And, especially when somebody is just trying to press your buttons and it's like, okay, I've seen this before. Like, are you done? Can I go yet?
Yeah. Yeah. So just bring down that emotion before making an actual decision. Great advice. Aaron, thanks again for being here. Again, if people want to reach out to you after the show, have a few more questions they want to ask you or find out about some of your programs, I know the website is the best place to go. Maybe you can repeat that one more time. And then if there's any other things that people should know about how to get in touch with you and Kern Community Foundation.
Sure. So the website is www.kernfoundation.org. You can always give us a call, 661-325-5346. Keep an eye out on our social medias, or you can sign up for our electronic newsletter. That will let you know when we're doing things like our scholarships or Give Big Kern or other events that we do throughout the year.
And of course, we'll have all of this in the show notes. So whatever podcast player you're using, just look down below and you should have links to everything that we just talked about. Aaron, thanks again.
A lot of fun.
Appreciate it.
This show has been brought to you by the Law Office of Kyle Jones, Troy Burton with the Lynn Company, CPA John Duffield, Scott Hansen Real Estate Lender, broker and investor, Dave Plivlich, President and CEO of the Marcom Group and MarcomBranding.com, and Amanda DiGiacomo, President of Atlas Financial Solutions. You've been listening to the Our 2 Cents podcast. Check out the show notes for links and more information about the show. Also visit our website at our2centspodcast.com or catch us on Instagram at Our 2 Cents Podcasts. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and share with others.